Our story begins with a dangerous-looking man, the protagonist, who steps out of a dark room after mercilessly killing his target. The victim had desperately begged for his life, warning that if the assassin spared him, another branch of his organization would eventually find and kill him. However, the assassin remained unfazed, ignoring the man's pleas and ending the conversation with a bullet to his head. This cold-blooded killer was none other than Kim Jong, the #1 hitman. Yet, despite his ruthless nature, Kim Jong had a softer side. He loved his loyal dog, Manhwa. After completing his task, he returned home to feed his beloved pet, but it was then he realized he had run out of snacks for Manhwa. As he contemplated his next steps, a notification appeared on his phone. Assuming it was another mission, Kim Jong opened the message, only to find it was spam. The message claimed to offer an opportunity to travel to the Murim world. Later that evening, while Kim Jong was at the store picking up snacks for Manhwa, another assassin appeared before him. With a smirk, the rival hitman called it a perfect day for Kim Jong to die, and mockingly bid farewell to the #1 hitman. Before Kim Jong could react, he was killed on the spot. In his final moments, the only thought he had was for his dog, Manhwa. Suddenly, Kim Jong's eyes opened again. To his shock, Manhwa was there, sitting beside him, along with a bald man dressed in strange clothes. In disbelief, Kim Jong grabbed his head, muttering, "Aren't I supposed to be dead?" His confusion only grew when he saw Manhwa sitting calmly next to him. The bald man stepped forward with a wide grin and proclaimed, "You've finally arrived, our savior!" At that, the gathered crowd of men began to cheer. The bald man introduced himself and explained that his wish was for Kim Jong to conquer the Murim world. Kim Jong, still confused, glanced around and muttered, "Where am I?" The bald man proudly revealed that this was another world, the legendary land of Murim. However, the excitement in the crowd quickly faded as Kim Jong pulled out his phone and attempted to go home. His expression remained unimpressed as he scrolled through his phone, saying flatly, "Send me back to my world." At that moment, an old man appeared. He was the leader of the cult and stood with an intimidating presence. The cult leader warned Kim Jong that his behavior could get him killed, but Kim Jong didn't back down. The bald man tried to calm the situation, saying even the cult leader couldn't threaten their supposed savior. The cult leader scoffed and issued a challenge. He declared, "If you can defeat me, you shall become the cult leader." Without hesitation, Kim Jong accepted the challenge. Yet, as soon as the cult leader released his aura, Kim Jong felt a chilling pressure unlike anything he had ever experienced, not even during his years as a hitman. The cult leader vanished into thin air and reappeared in front of Kim Jong, delivering a single punch that sent him flying. The cult leader smirked and mocked him, saying, "Is this the savior you all spoke of?" Before the fight could escalate further, Manhwa growled and attempted to bite the cult leader to protect his master. The cult leader showed no mercy to the small animal and ordered the bald man, "Feed it to the wolves." Kim Jong's eyes widened in rage as he slowly stood up, his voice cold and firm. "Touch my dog and I'll kill you." The cult leader laughed off the threat, but Kim Jong's expression darkened. He spoke with quiet intensity. "Do you know who the strongest person in the world is? It's not the one with money. It's not the one with strength or a blade in their hand." He pulled a gun from his side and aimed it at the cult leader's head. "The strongest person in the world is the one with a gun in his hand." The cult leader sneered, assuming Kim Jong was holding a mere toy. Before he could react, the gun fired. The bullet struck the cult leader in the forehead, killing him instantly. Silence filled the room as the cult leader's body crumpled to the ground. The bald man stood frozen in shock before yelling, "Kill him! He murdered the cult leader!" Kim Jong, unfazed and calm, pulled out another gun and prepared for the onslaught. He smirked and muttered under his breath, "I've been ready for this." Kim Jong charged his gun toward the members of the demonic cult without hesitation, taking down anyone who charged at him, saying, "You chose the wrong opponent." With each shot, the cult members fell, the bullets striking their heads, bodies, and limbs. The bullets seemed to pass through effortlessly. The bald man witnessing this was stunned. Kim Jong remembered his past, recalling how he had once dealt with gang members in a similarly ruthless manner. Kim Jong, known as the Ghost of Fighting, at 18 years old, had never hesitated to bring someone to the edge of defeat. Suddenly, a man in a suit appeared and asked, "Do you think you're the strongest? But do you know who the strongest is? The one you can't defeat?" Kim Jong, confused and irritated by the man's cryptic words, didn't understand him. In a sudden moment, the suited man fired a shot at Kim Jong's feet and said, "You can never overcome a gun." Kim Jong, taken aback, asked, "Why did you shoot at me?" The man laughed and explained that he had come to make him an offer. He then told Kim Jong that his fate, whether he would live or face another outcome, would be decided by a single action, and promised to help him become the strongest. The bald man, wounded in the shoulder, was trembling as Kim Jong asked, "Do you know who the strongest person here is?" The bald man, clearly frightened, offered everything he had in exchange for his life. Later, Kim Jong sat confidently in the cult leader's chair, now the new leader, with Manchu the vice leader by his side. Despite his new position, Kim Jong was still angry with the bald man for placing him in this role. He asked how he could return to his world, but the bald man had no answer. Kim Jong slowly approached the bald man and said he should have been more honest from the beginning, holding a gun to his head. He promised the bald man that he would ensure his return to the former cult leader. The bald man begged for more time, and with no other option, Kim Jong agreed. Hearing the bald, suddenly, Kim Jong received a notification on his phone stating that if he completed a mission in the Murim world, he would be able to return to Earth. The task was to conquer Murim within a year, with the penalty being the loss of his beloved Manhwa. Kim Jong, stressed by the message, immediately turned to the bald man. However, the bald man was preparing to run. The bald man apologized to Kim Jong, saying he would stay and not attempt to flee. Annoyed by his behavior, Kim Jong began to punish him. After clearing his throat, Kim Jong declared, "I will conquer the Murim world." The bald man, overwhelmed with emotion, shed tears of happiness. Kim Jong then added a condition. The bald man rushed toward the door, shouting the word "leader" to the remaining cult members, announcing that the new Manghwa sect would conquer Murim. Upon hearing this, the members began to cheer, shouting, "Manghwa sect!" They were excited about the new name, Manghwa, and even more so about their new leader's companion, Manhwa.
Throughout the Murim world, shocking news spread like wildfire. The leader of the infamous demonic cult, now rebranded as the Manghwa cult, had been replaced. Sect leaders across the martial world were stunned by the development. Whispers of the new leader's strange demonic arts and deadly efficiency reached every corner of the land. It was said that with every movement the leader made, a life was claimed. Fear rippled through the sects, leaving the Murim leaders uneasy. Within the Manghwa cult itself, turmoil brewed among the elders. The fifth elder, a staunch traditionalist, was incensed upon hearing of the leadership change, which had occurred without his approval. He loudly voiced his dissent, declaring, "I never agreed to summon some savior bastard to lead us." Another figure, round and disgruntled, stepped forward, none other than the chubby and self-proclaimed fourth elder. "Do you think I've sacrificed sleep, food, and my leisure for the cult only to be left out of such a monumental decision?" he grumbled. The fifth elder sneered. "Sacrifice? You've barely contributed anything except your appetite." The tension in the room was palpable, but it was suddenly broken by the arrival of an imposing figure, the former cult leader, Kim Jong. His presence alone sent a wave of submission through the room, and all the elders dropped to their knees in reverence, all but one. The chubby elder, distracted by the sight of a small, playful dog in the room, seemed oblivious. The main character, MC, now the new cult leader, watched the display in disbelief. His patience snapped, and he struck the chubby elder hard across the face. "If you dare act so carelessly in front of me again, you'll regret it," he warned, his voice cold and sharp. The chubby elder scrambled to apologize, while the bald elder, ever composed, intervened. "Let us begin the council meeting. he announced, steering the room back to order. Sitting comfortably in the leader's chair, the MC made a bold declaration. In 1 year, I will conquer the entire Murim world. If I fail, everyone here will die. Gasps filled the room, and the second elder hesitantly raised his hand to speak. But before he could voice his concerns, the MC silenced him with a glare. Don't waste my time. I already know your question, and the answer is irrelevant. The room was thick with unease, but none dared to challenge the leader. None except the fifth elder. His defiance boiled over as he slammed his fist on the table. Who made you the leader? He growled. This is a joke. I can't accept this. If you want my acknowledgement, you'll have to prove yourself. Duel me. The MC's eyes narrowed as he regarded the elder with barely veiled annoyance. Fine, he said simply. Let's settle this. The fifth elder smirked, convinced that the MC's confidence was nothing more than bravado. He believed the new leader relied on strange tricks, much like the old one. The MC, meanwhile, glanced at his gun, silently calculating how many bullets he had left. It wasn't many, and he didn't intend to waste them on what he saw as a pointless display. The bald elder tried to interject. Fifth elder, you don't understand. But the fifth elder ignored him, continuing to mock the MC. What's wrong? Afraid of a real fight? Or are you only good at running your mouth? The MC's composure began to crack under the relentless provocation. His hand hovered over his gun, but a sudden notification on his phone pulled his attention. Whatever message he saw made his expression darken further. Let's proceed, the MC said finally, his tone chillingly calm. But under one condition, this duel will determine the position of cult leader. If you lose, you'll step aside for good. The fifth elder hesitated. For the first time, a sliver of doubt crept into his mind as he saw the terrifying resolve in the MC's eyes. It wasn't just the calm of a confident man, it was the quiet fury of someone who wouldn't hesitate to end him. The air grew heavier as both men prepared to settle their fates. Rumors about the fifth elder and the former cult leader had been circulating among the cult members. Two members were deep in discussion. One of them said, Isn't Kim Jeon bold? He challenged an elder right after becoming the leader. The fifth elder is powerful too. They say his strength is unmatched. Even if a strong fighter lands a punch on him, he won't budge. In fact, the person who strikes him will collapse from exhaustion. Because of this overwhelming resilience, the fifth elder had earned the nickname Sturdy Fortress. As the two were engrossed in their discussion, a fat cult member approached them and interrupted. You don't know the half of it, he said. You haven't experienced the terror of Kim Geon firsthand, like I have. The fat member recounted the events in a hushed but intense voice. I was there when the former leader was killed. A sudden bolt of thunder struck him down immediately. After that, lightning hit us all, and we fell to our knees, trembling in fear. Kim Geon didn't even spare the elders. He killed them mercilessly. Hearing this, the two members were terrified and fell silent. News of the duel spread quickly, and the stadium filled with cult members eager to witness the battle. The place was crowded, buzzing with tension. The fifth elder stood in the center, confident in his strength, while Kim Jeon, calm and composed, glared coldly at his opponent. The rules of the challenge were simple. Both fighters would take turns attacking, and the last one standing would be the winner. The fifth elder, smirking, gave Kim Geon the first chance to attack. However, Kim Geon wasted no time. He smiled faintly, pulled out a gun, and declared, I'll aim for your chest. The fifth elder remained unfazed, standing tall. The crowd watched in anticipation as Kim Geon suddenly fired, not at the chest, but directly into the elder's leg. The audience gasped in shock. Some dismissed the shot, murmuring that it was loud but meaningless, saying, It won't even scratch the fifth elder. But the fifth elder let out a cry of pain and staggered, barely able to stand. Angrily, he shouted, You cheated! You said you'd aim for my chest! Kim Jeon smirked and replied coolly, I lied. The elder's face flushed red with rage. Taking a long, steadying breath, he announced that it was now his turn. I'll use my secret technique, he declared. The crowd murmured with excitement. But before the elder could even begin his attack, Kim Geon fired again, this time at his other leg. The arena fell into stunned silence. Everyone froze, unable to comprehend what they had just witnessed. Kim Gyeon stood calmly as always while the referee looked on in disbelief. Breaking the silence, Kim Gyeon remarked, "Where is it written that I have to announce my attacks?" The bald man watching from the sidelines was frozen in shock, unable to speak. The fifth elder collapsed to the ground, unable to land a single blow. Kim Gyeon slowly approached the defeated elder. Standing over him, he said coldly, "To escape a tiger's den, all you need is a gun." The fifth elder, trembling with fear, realized that if he tried to challenge Kim Gyeon again, he might not survive. Desperate, he began apologizing. But Kim Gyeon, without hesitation, pulled the trigger. To everyone's surprise, nothing happened. Kim Gyeon calmly lowered the weapon and walked away, leaving the elder stunned and confused. The fifth elder, lying on the ground, felt tears in his eyes. What a sight of a true leader, he thought to himself, moved by what he believed was brotherly kindness. In his mind, he was convinced that Kim Gyeon had spared him out of respect. In reality, however, Kim Gyeon's gun was simply out of bullets. Suddenly, a message popped up in front of Kim Gyeon. Mission complete. Reward acquired. He smirked, clearly satisfied with the outcome. Meanwhile, the bald man watching the duel whispered in disbelief, "The fifth elder just returned from the gates of hell, and yet we still have all 5 elders." With the duel over, peace returned briefly to the stadium. All the enemies had been eliminated. Just then, a woman appeared. She was stunningly beautiful, graceful, and held an air of authority. This was the third elder. The third elder smiled faintly as she observed the chaos left behind. Her eyes glimmered with intrigue as she said quietly to herself, "I look forward to meeting this Kim Gyeon." It was early morning when Kim Gyeon woke from his sleep. His eyes fluttered open, the faint light of the rising sun filtering through the window. But something felt wrong. As he sat up, he saw Mongu standing in front of him, his face twisted in an angry scowl. At first, Kim Gyeon assumed Mongu was just hungry. He'd seen him act like this before, grumbling when food was scarce. But there was something different in his irritation this time. Before Kim Gyeon could ask what was going on, a familiar, unsettling figure appeared. None other than the fifth elder. Kim Gyeon's frown deepened. The elder's presence in the morning was always a bad sign. True to form, the fifth elder had come to rouse him, a task that was rarely anything but unpleasant. But today, instead of the usual greetings, Kim Gyeon felt his annoyance surge. Without thinking, he leapt up and delivered a punch to the elder's face. The old man barely flinched to lay his calm expression unchanged. "I was just the night guard while you slept, Kim Gyeon," the fifth elder said, unfazed. "No need for such hostility." Kim Gyeon let out a frustrated sigh. "Just leave me alone. I'm not in the mood for interruptions." The elder muttered something under his breath and stepped back. Kim Gyeon began to turn away, but just then the bald man appeared. He had been tasked with bringing all the elders to Kim Gyeon that morning. Serious and stern, reluctantly, Kim Gyeon followed him, still groggy as he entered the meeting hall. The second elder was already at the head of the table, his expression grim as he began speaking, his words heavy with the weight of their sect's past. "The alliance of the orthodox sects," the second elder began, "is a formidable threat. They despise us and seek our destruction. In the past, we struck at their citizens without mercy, and we were utterly defeated. Since then, the Blood Sect has remained neutral, staying out of their wars. But that time is coming to an end. We must act." Kim Gyeon listened, though his mind wandered. Talk of peace and alliances had never interested him. Restoring honor or righting past wrongs wasn't his goal. His only mission remained the same, to conquer Murim and complete his mission. But we, the Blood Sect, must remain strong and united under our leader, the cult leader. It is the only way we will survive in this world of bloodshed. Kim Gyeon raised an eyebrow, cutting through the elder's speech with a scoffing tone. "Peace?" he questioned, disbelieving. "I don't care about peace. All I care about is my mission. Conquer Murim. That's what matters." The second elder's face tightened, clearly displeased by Kim Gyeon's defiance, but he refrained from arguing. Instead, Kim Gyeon's gaze shifted to the others in the room, the silent elders who had been passive until now. "Why am I the savior?" Kim Gyeon demanded, his voice sharp. "Why do I have to carry this title? None of you can explain it. Why am I the chosen one?" The bald man, who had been silent up until now, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I didn't know," he muttered. "I didn't know you would be the savior." Kim Gyeon turned his curious gaze toward him. "What do you mean?" "It happened years ago during an attack. I was trying to escape when I was ambushed. I thought I was done for. But then, a figure appeared. He moved slowly, deliberately, and with a single punch, he snapped the enemy's neck. I begged him to spare me, and he did. Before he left, he dropped a manual telling me that on a certain day and at a certain time, a savior would rise to unite Murim. Then he vanished." Kim Gyeon's mind raced as he processed the bald man's words. This mystery only deepened. Who was this figure? What did he want? The bald man hesitated, his eyes narrowing as he spoke. "I'm not sure, but I think he was also bald like me." The elders exchanged wary glances, and one of them asked, "How do you know?" The bald man shrugged nonchalantly, a grin spreading across his face. "Baldy to baldy," he replied with a wink. Boss Kim Gyeon, even more confused now, stared down at his hands. Was this unknown figure somehow the one who had set him on this path? If so, what was his purpose? What did he want from him? His thoughts were interrupted by the sudden sound of commotion outside the hall. A cult member burst through the door, breathless. "Cult leader, there's a situation outside. You need to see it immediately." Kim Gyeon's heart skipped a beat. He followed the member outside, and his eyes widened in shock at the sight of the aftermath of a brutal attack. All the soldiers were either unconscious or worse, scattered on the ground. Standing over them was a new martial master, his expression a strange mix of casual amusement and cold menace. "Is this the new cult leader?" the martial master asked, his voice laced with mock curiosity. He was none other than the notorious Ghost Sword, a figure known across Murim for his ruthless ambition. Kim Gyeon's irritation flared. "What are you doing here, Ghost Sword? And why bring so many of your men? Are you preparing for a battle?" Ghost Sword grinned, his eyes gleaming with dark amusement. "I've come for an opportunity to take over the Blood Sect. This is the perfect moment. I've heard rumors you were the one who killed the last cult leader. I want to see if it's true." Kim Gyeon felt his temper rise. Ghost Sword's arrogance, his complete lack of respect, was infuriating. "You think this is a battlefield, Ghost Sword?" Kim Gyeon sneered, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Is this your grand performance? You're already dead, and you don't even know it." Ghost Sword laughed, enjoying the tension in the air. "You'll understand soon enough." Just then, a massive figure emerged from the back of the hall, a giant of a man wielding an enormous axe. His sheer presence was so overwhelming it took Kim Gyeon a moment to process who it was. This was the second in command of the Ghost Sword sect, a name that was well known for his power and his size. The giant man charged forward, his axe swinging with deadly precision. Kim Gyeon quickly braced for impact, but as the attack drew near, he realized with a jolt of horror that he had forgotten his gun. Just as the enemy's blow was about to land, the fat elder stepped forward, positioning himself between Kim Gyeon and the strike. The blow hit the fat elder's shield, but the elder stood firm, unyielding. The fifth elder, seeing the attack on the sect leader, couldn't hold back his fury. He unleashed his special technique, tearing through the enemy forces with brutal efficiency. Kim Gyeon watched with a mix of relief and admiration as the elders proved their worth, cutting down the enemies in their path. It was clear that they weren't as useless as he had thought. Finally, Ghost Sword stirred again, his laughter echoing through the air. Kim Gyeon, his irritation boiling over, shot back, "We don't let enemies live long enough to fight us." With a smirk, Kim Gyeon pulled a small knife from his belt. "Elders," he commanded, his voice cold, "pick down every single one of them." With that, the battle erupted into full force. The fate of the Blood Sect hung in the balance, and Kim Gyeon's resolve only hardened.
He directed the fat elder and the fifth elder to eliminate the enemy. The two elders exchanged a look of shared anticipation, their eyes gleaming with excitement. "We've been waiting for this moment. they both declared in unison before charging forward into the heart of the battle. The fat elder, not known for his agility, misstepped and crashed to the ground with a loud thud. Kim Jeon, watching from a distance, couldn't help but think, the fourth elder is still useless. Meanwhile, the fifth elder, fury radiating from him, landed gracefully amidst the chaos. His expression was one of intense focus, as if this battle had been his life's purpose. A sly smile curved at the edges of his lips as he eagerly prepared to meet the enemy head-on. Without any hesitation, the enemy charged, weapons drawn and intent on ending the battle quickly. But the fifth elder wasn't intimidated. Armed only with his immense strength and skill, he dispatched them one by one with deadly efficiency. His movements were fluid, each strike swift and precise, leaving the enemies with no chance. The fifth elder fought with the calm confidence of a seasoned master, dispatching the opposition as though they were nothing more than training dummies. He didn't even break a sweat as his enemies began to falter, fear taking hold of their hearts. Just then, a long-haired enemy surged forward, sword raised high, aiming to strike a decisive blow. But the fifth elder was quicker. With a single effortless motion, he snapped the sword in half, as if it were made of mere paper. The enemy's eyes widened in shock before the fifth elder seized him by the throat and casually tossed him aside, as though he were nothing more than a rag doll. The battle continued, relentless. Another enemy lunged at the fifth elder, but just in time, the fat elder appeared, blocking the attack with his massive frame. "Don't worry, I've got your back," he bellowed, his voice filled with reassurance. As the enemy swung his sword, the fat elder caught the blade with his bare hand, grinning widely. In one smooth motion, he delivered a punch straight to the enemy's face. Strangely, the punch was soft, almost as if it lacked real force, and the enemy, dazed, appeared to enjoy it as he stumbled backward in confusion. Kim Geon, observing the scene, felt a surge of annoyance. "This is the help I have?" His brow furrowed in frustration. Just as he turned his attention back to the battle, a group of enemies from the Ghost Sword sect attempted to ambush him from behind, their sinister grins making it clear they had planned this attack carefully. What they didn't know, however, was that Kim Geon was no ordinary warrior. In his previous life, he had been a feared assassin, and his instincts were razor-sharp. As the enemies closed in on him, he moved like lightning. In a heartbeat, he snapped one of their necks, the sickening crack echoing across the battlefield. The remaining enemies froze, their faces a mix of disbelief and fear. Kim Geon wasted no time. With a swift, practiced motion, he drew a knife and sliced through the throat of another enemy, his movements precise and fluid. More attackers surged forward, but it was clear they were walking straight into their own demise. Kim Geon moved forward with the grace of a dancer, yet each step was a death sentence for his foes. His strikes were deliberate, every movement flawless as he methodically cleared the battlefield. He was calm, unwavering, his confidence radiating from him as he dispatched his enemies one by one. His message was unmistakable. Know your opponent before you rush in. The remaining attackers, now filled with dread, hesitated, unsure how to deal with a force they couldn't seem to stop. Meanwhile, the fifth elder was making quick work of his enemies, systematically dismantling them on his side of the battlefield. One by one, the last of the attackers fell, their bodies hitting the ground with a heavy thud, leaving no one standing. The sect leader of the Ghost Sword sect suddenly charged into the fray, sword raised high, gleaming menacingly in the dim light. The fifth elder, agile as ever, easily dodged the attack, his eyes narrowing with disdain. "Cheap tricks," he muttered under his breath, disgusted by the sect leader's dishonorable tactics. Just as he prepared to retaliate, however, a wave of dizziness overtook him. The poison he had been afflicted with earlier began to take its toll. The sect leader smirked darkly, clearly enjoying the fifth elder's struggle. "You won't make it out of this alive," he taunted. The two combatants clashed with a brutal explosion of force, their fists and swords meeting in a deadly dance. The fifth elder, despite his weakening condition, fought on with every last ounce of strength. Kim Geon felt the tension in the air, knowing that if the fifth elder fell, it would be disastrous. His heart raced as he looked for a solution. Just when all seemed lost, his loyal dog Mongu appeared, bounding toward him with something clutched in his mouth. It was Kim Geon's gun, In one smooth motion, Kim Jeon grabbed the weapon from Mongu, reloading it with practiced ease. He had only a limited supply of bullets, but he was resolute. He would not allow the Ghost Sword sect leader to live. Taking a steadying breath, Kim Jeon aimed the gun at the sect leader, his finger hovering over the trigger. He had made up his mind. This threat would be eliminated. As the battle between the Fifth Elder and the sect leader raged on, a new presence entered the fray. A figure descended from the sky, landing gracefully amidst the chaos. It was the Third Elder. In one fluid motion, she dispatched the Ghost Sword sect leader, using a chain to choke him into submission until he crumpled to the ground, dead. With the leader of the Ghost Sword sect vanquished, the Third Elder stood tall, victorious. And with a confident voice, she introduced herself. "I am the Third Elder, and these are my companions." Kim Jeon studied her closely, his sharp gaze sizing her up. "So this is the Third Elder," he thought. "She's far more capable than the others." A spark of curiosity lit up in her eyes as she turned toward Kim Jeon, her expression playful yet serious. "I'm curious," she said, her voice holding a challenge. "Let's see how strong you really are." With that, she charged forward, a dagger gleaming in her hand, ready to test Kim Jeon's abilities. Kim Jeon, never one to back down from a challenge, met her gaze with a smirk. He was ready for whatever came next. Kim Jeon stood motionless, his expression impassive but his gaze sharp and unwavering as it locked onto the Third Elder. Her sudden strike had been like a flash of lightning, but Kim Jeon's reflexes were even faster. Instinctively, he deflected the blow, the sound of steel slicing through the air ringing out, causing a tense silence to fall over the room. For the Third Elder, this wasn't just a test of skill, it was curiosity. How could this man, the new sect leader, possibly defeat someone as powerful as the previous elder? It couldn't have been mere luck. Standing face to face with him, she realized that Kim Jeon was far from an ordinary leader. "Don't do that," Kim Jeon's voice cut through the silence, calm but edged with a quiet authority. His right hand subtly gestured toward her in a silent yet unmistakable warning. The Third Elder didn't move, but her lips curled into a faint smirk, unsatisfied by the brief encounter. "She wants to see more," Kim Jeon thought, his patience beginning to wear thin. In that moment, the atmosphere in the room shifted. Something changed, though it was impossible to see. It was a pressure, thick and palpable, that descended upon them all, like the calm before a storm. The air around Kim Jeon seemed to darken, wrapping the room in a heavy, suffocating silence. It wasn't a visible aura, but it was undeniable, an oppressive weight that pressed against the chest. The Third Elder, who moments ago had been fearless, now found herself frozen. Every instinct screamed danger, as though moving even an inch would mean certain death. She had faced many powerful warriors in her life, but nothing like this. This was pure terror. From the side, the bald elder watched in shock, his eyes wide with disbelief. How could someone emit such pressure without lifting a finger? The Third Elder, her dagger still gripped tightly in her hand, slowly lowered it, stepping back with caution. "I only wanted to see if you were truly worthy of leading the cult," she said. Later that day, Kim Jeon sat in the cult leader's chamber, alone with his thoughts. The world of Murim was unlike anything he had ever encountered. Warriors who could send enemies flying into the sky with a single punch, swords that could cleave mountains in two. Painful memories from his past began to resurface like dark shadows, threatening to overwhelm him. Monghu, sensing Kim Jeon's mood, approached and tried to offer a few comforting words. After a moment, Kim Jeon called for the bald elder. "Where can I find information on my potential enemies?" he asked, his tone direct and unyielding. "I need to know everything. If I'm to conquer Murim, I need to see every move coming." The bald elder blinked in surprise, clearly taken aback by Kim Jeon's straightforward approach. After a brief pause, he responded, "Leader, you should visit the Hao clan. They have spies and informants everywhere, gathering intelligence on everything that happens in Murim." Kim Jeon nodded, his mind already working. "Where are they located?" The bald elder hesitated, a wary look crossing his face. "Leader, are you planning to go alone?" he asked cautiously. "If so, I strongly recommend taking an escort with you." Kim Jeon's eyes narrowed slightly. "Don't even think about including that crazy Third Elder," he replied with a sharp edge in his voice. The bald elder shifted uncomfortably at the mention of the third elder's name. Unfortunately, leader, only she knows the location of the Hao clan. Kim Jeon's face twisted in annoyance, frustration creeping into his expression. Just as he was about to voice his displeasure, the fifth elder appeared out of nowhere, his face full of eager determination. Leader, you can't leave me behind. We share the same body after all. Kim Jeon shot him a glare of pure irritation. No, you're not coming. Despite Kim Jeon's firm refusal, the fifth elder refused to relent. By the time they were ready to set out, Kim Jeon's patience had reached its breaking point. Between the ever-bickering fifth elder and the unpredictable third elder, the journey felt more like a nightmare than a mission. In a quiet moment, as the group prepared to depart, Kim Jeon muttered under his breath, "I'm going to kill that bald elder when I see him again." Night fell, and the group decided to rest at a small, modest inn along the road. It was quiet, the kind of place they needed after the long journey. As they settled in to order food, the peaceful atmosphere was abruptly shattered by the loud crash of a door swinging open. A group of drunken men stumbled in, their voices boisterous and loud. They were first-generation disciples of the Kunlun sect, proudly wearing robes that clearly marked their affiliation. The air grew thick with their arrogance. "Bring us your finest alcohol," one of the disciples bellowed as he lurched toward the counter. Spotting Kim Jeon standing in line, one of the men sneered, his drunken eyes scanning him disdainfully. "Oi, move aside, you're in our way. Find another inn. This one's ours now." Before Kim Jeon could respond, the disciple's gaze shifted to the third elder, a wicked grin spreading across his face. "What's a beauty like you doing with these low-class men? Come sit with us. We'll treat you better," he said, his voice dripping with arrogance. The third elder's eyes flashed with irritation, but she quickly reminded herself of the second elder's warning. Avoid unnecessary trouble, especially with enemy sects. Her fists clenched, but she restrained herself, choosing silence over conflict. Kim Jeon, however, was not so inclined to let the disrespect slide. Without a second thought, he stepped forward and landed a brutal strike to the Kunlun disciple's stomach. The man crumpled to the ground, gasping in pain, his face twisted in shock. You've messed with the wrong guy," he wheezed, struggling to catch his breath. Kim Jeon didn't answer. He simply delivered another swift kick, sending the disciple flying across the room, his body crashing into a table. "Tell your friends I'll be waiting for them," Kim Jeon said coolly, his voice laced with disdain as he glanced at the remaining disciples. Meanwhile, the fifth elder muttered under his breath, "We're doomed." The bald elder, observing the chaos from the sidelines, let out a heavy sigh. This is going to end badly, he thought, his gaze drifting toward the group of stunned disciples, wondering how this was going to escalate.